And there's your release right there. Wait for it. There it goes. Good day, folks. It's DIY Guy 123 here, bringing in another do-it-yourself video. Today we've got a tire on an alloy wheel, and as you can see from these bubbles of soapy water here, that there's a leak right there. Well, the first thing to do is identify if it's, obviously in this case, I know it's between the bead and the sidewall, so that means the tire has to come off. It doesn't necessarily have to come off of the rim, but it does have to come away from the bead, and you have to clean on the inside where it's not sealing properly. So first thing I do is if I had a piece of chalk, I'd mark it to let me know exactly where it's leaking, which is right about here. In this case, I don't have a piece of chalk handy, so I'm gonna just remember that it's right about between the BLA for Blazer, which is the little model of this tire. So how do we fix this? Well, it's very difficult to get tires off the rim without some kind of a tool, without a tire changing machine, of course. I've got another YouTube video, you can search my other videos, where I put a plank up on the tire, not on the rim, but on the tire, and I drove a vehicle up on the plank, and the weight of the vehicle collapsed the tire on the rim. That worked beautifully and was really, you know, kind of a backyard redneck way to do it. Worked great. I happen to have this shop press here. It's a 20-ton, but you don't need that much strength to break the bead off this tire. And if you just push down on the sidewall with this small area, it could damage the tire, I suppose. Probably won't, but it could. But instead what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna push down on this great big flat bar. So let's get this in place and get this guy in place here. Now, it's also important to let the air out. There are little tools that you can use to extract the tire valve and all the air will come out. I'm just gonna use, and you can see here I've got an tire inflator. I'm just gonna use the release on this, or you could just hold the trigger and that will eventually let the air out. Some tire inflators don't have an air release like this one, but either way, works fine. You can just use that to release the air. So, if you don't release the air, you're not gonna have an easy time getting it off the bead. Now as I'm pushing down, you can see more bubbles start there. There's still some air in the tire. I'm gonna just, as I'm pushing down on with the press, I'll continue to release the air here. Ideally, you'd have all the air out before you even start with the press, but here's what it is. And just let that air catch up. Yeah, it's okay. I mean, the tires are pretty tough. I wouldn't want to put a sharp edge poking hard into the sidewall. You know, probably would be a good idea to release this and move this piece of steel that way a little bit, but I don't think this tire is going to provide a lot of resistance. You know what? I am going to do it. I'm teaching, I should probably do my best to be by the book. Now, I want to watch that my big piece of steel doesn't actually fetch up on the rim. If I notice that all of a sudden it gets really hard to pump, then that may have been what happened. Yeah, and it did right there, so it won't take a lot. I'll just knock that off. There it goes, that's all.
Got it?
Yeah. Oh, taking a long time?
No, it's fine.
I'll just edit it out. Sure. I know that's still poking on the sidewall a little bit, but there's not a great deal of force. Look, I can stick my thumb in the tire, so there's probably only about 10 pounds of air in the tire. And so what'll happen is you'll continue to pump on this, and eventually all of a sudden the tire will collapse off the bead. It's got to rise up over a lip on the inside of the rim. Now if it really just doesn't want to give up, I've had in the past where I've had to release the whole thing, rotate the tire, say a third of a turn, and push somewhere else. And like if you push here and there and there and there and there, like eventually it's going to break. And yes, I am contacting the rim. Let's release that ever so slightly. Might as well stop that for a bit. Right. Okay, so I've repositioned this bar and I made sure that this is not going to push on the rim. And so we're just going to keep on going. And eventually you're going to hear a poof as the bead pops off the rim. Now, if you happen to hear any tearing sounds or ripping sounds, stop, because you could be damaging the sidewall. And there's your release right there. But if you do hear any ripping, tearing sounds, like that's obviously really bad. You don't want that. You've been either too aggressive or you tried to pop this with all the air in the tire or something. But in any case, it's not great. Okay, so see, I just made a dumb mistake there. I had my hand here and I was trying to push this out of the way. If that sprung out of the way, and if the tire should snap back like this, it won't, because there's not any air pressure in it. Just be careful if you're pumping the tire up, which I wasn't, and you have your hand there, that's a dangerous thing. Okay, so to get this out, I'm gonna have to put it on the floor and give it a bit of a, okay, so there, that's out. You look in there, you can see a little ridge, and that's where tire sidewall had to pop up over that ridge right there. The bead had to pop over there. So I'm gonna blow this all off and clean it.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if this was a steel rim, there'd likely be a bunch of rust right at that interface. People often think that tires leak between actually the pad of my finger, where I'm touching right there on the side, and this side of the rubber. That's not where they leak. They leak where the pad of this finger is touching and the part of the rubber that I can't get my finger on. So that's generally where they leak. Now, if there was any kind of rust or corrosion here, you'd want to get that out of there. This is an alloy wheel, so there's no rust. There could be some corrosion. But what I'm going to do is, instead of hitting it with sandpaper, just going to take a bit of grease. This is kind of like the backyard redneck way. And not a ton, but I'm just going to line that bead with grease. And you got to imagine the air leak that was causing those tiny bubbles is such a small little hole that the air was getting through. I'm now plugging that with some grease. Now that likely is enough. You know, I blew any dirt out of there, cleaned it up with some grease. There's also a product called Bead Sealer you can get. Now, I can tell that that is actually holding air, and you're gonna hear that pop. Back the camera up a bit, because it's gonna pop and snap into place. And that gap will go away. After you started inflating, do not put your fingers between the rubber and the rim, because this is gonna happen. Wait for it. There it goes. So I'll continue to pump this up. It probably takes about 35 PSI. I'm gonna put 40 in it, just give a little extra, just while I'm testing for leaks. There's 40 right on the gauge. If you recall, I had said it was leaking at the BLA part of Blazer. And this was soapy water that I carefully put on there. I didn't splash it around, so it didn't make any bubbles. And you can see there are no more leaks right there. So I'll continue to test with some water all the way around the whole bead, whole rim, I guess. Now, a little trick, if you're kind of sloppy when you put the soapy water on and you get some bubbles just from the way you put it on, you take your finger and migrate all the bubbles in front of your finger, and you may have to do that a couple times, but you'll basically get all the bubbles off. So there's water here, but no more bubbles, and that's going to be the easy way for you to tell if you have any air leaks. So look, that's the end of this video. Good luck with your do-it-yourself projects. If you like my videos, please subscribe.